The sound of tires on gravel still echoes in my memory. I stood there frozen, suitcase in hand, as the car carrying the people I trusted most sped away, leaving nothing but dust in the air and an ache in my chest. My own family had just abandoned me. In that instant, I wasn't a mother or a grandmother. I wasn't a woman who had given decades of her life to nurture and protect. I was simply a burden they had decided to cast aside. The air was sharp that evening, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The street lamps flickered against the growing twilight, and the silence that followed was louder than any words they could have spoken. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to understand what had just happened. One moment, I was hopeful, thinking this trip might bring us closer, and the next, I was stranded, alone, and unwanted. I can still see their taillights disappearing around the bend, like two small red eyes watching me with finality. My heart thudded painfully, each beat whispering the same question. How could they, my daughter, the very person I had raised through sleepless nights and endless struggles, had decided that I no longer had a place in her life, and my son-in-law, who had smiled in my face while secretly mocking me, had been her willing accomplice. Shock numbed me at first. I told myself it couldn't be real, that surely they would turn back, that this was just a cruel misunderstanding. But as the minutes dragged on and the darkness thickened, reality settled like ice in my bones. They weren't coming back. I stood there, suitcase handle cutting into my palm, wondering how a heart could break so completely in a single moment. And yet, deep down, a small voice whispered that this was not the end. It was the beginning of something I could not yet name. That was the moment I realized everything was about to change. When I think back over my life, it's almost like flipping through an old scrapbook. Every page filled with sacrifices I made willingly, never once questioning if anyone noticed. I remember nights rocking a feverish child while the rest of the world slept. Mornings rushing to work after packing lunches. Evenings sewing hems or helping with school projects long after my body begged for rest. I never thought of it as extraordinary. I thought it was simply what mothers do. I worked hard, sometimes juggling 2 jobs, just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Vacations were rare, and luxuries almost non-existent. But I told myself that my children deserved opportunities I never had. If they wanted piano lessons or a new pair of cleats, I'd quietly trim the grocery budget or go without a winter coat to make sure they had what they needed. I wore the same pair of shoes until the soles nearly gave out, while their closets filled with everything I could afford. It wasn't only about money. It was about presence. I sat through every recital, every game, every award ceremony. I clapped the loudest, beamed with pride, and told anyone who would listen about how brilliant, how talented, how good my children were. I thought love like that built unbreakable bonds. And yet, as the years passed, I began to notice how quickly my efforts faded into the background. The hot meals I cooked were met with silence. The clean clothes folded neatly in drawers went unacknowledged. The rides across town taken for granted. Gratitude was fleeting, replaced by an expectation that I would always be there, always ready to give more. I brushed off the unease, convincing myself it was just the way of things, that children rarely recognize their parents' sacrifices until they have their own families. I held on to that hope, telling myself that one day they would look back and understand just how much love had been poured into every choice I made. But deep inside, I sometimes wondered if my giving had taught them to expect, rather than to appreciate. And in quiet moments, I felt the weight of being invisible in the very lives I had helped build. I didn't realize it then, but the cracks were already forming, and soon, those small fractures would grow into something far more painful. The cruelty didn't begin with a dramatic scene. It crept in slowly, disguised as little moments I tried to ignore. At first, it was the way they rolled their eyes when I offered an opinion, as if my words were old-fashioned and irrelevant. I would laugh it off, telling myself I was just being sensitive. But the sting lingered long after the conversation ended. I remember sitting at the dinner table, listening to them make plans for a family outing, only to realize I wasn't included. They spoke as though I wasn't even in the room, brushing past me like I was a piece of furniture. When I finally asked about it, they smiled politely and said it was something I wouldn't enjoy. I swallowed the hurt, pretending to agree. But inside, I felt the hollow ache of being left out of my own family's life. The financial slights were even sharper. I had always been generous, paying for meals, covering emergencies, helping with bills. But slowly, it shifted from gratitude to expectation. My wallet became a silent character in every gathering, opened automatically, without a thank you, without even acknowledgement. And when I hesitated once, just once, I saw the flash of annoyance in their eyes, as if my worth was tied only to what I could provide. Even my belongings weren't safe. A treasured necklace, a gift from my late husband, disappeared one day. When I asked about it, I was met with dismissive shrugs and the suggestion that I must have misplaced it. I wanted to believe them, but deep down, I knew the truth. My treasures didn't hold the same value to them as they did to me. Each small cruelty piled on top of the last, building a weight I carried quietly. I told myself families go through phases, that perhaps I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew these weren't just accidents or misunderstandings. They were choices, deliberate actions that revealed how little I truly mattered in their eyes. I tried to convince myself the worst was behind me, that things couldn't get any colder between us. But I was wrong. The signs I brushed aside were only the beginning. Something much harsher was waiting just beyond the horizon. I wish I could say the worst of it came as a surprise, but deep down, I think I had been bracing for it all along. The tension had been building, small cruelties stacking one on top of another until they became a wall I could barely see over. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the day they finally made their intentions clear. It happened during what was supposed to be a family trip. I told myself this was my chance to reconnect, to prove I still belonged. I packed carefully, clinging to hope, determined to make the most of it. But that hope shattered the moment the car door slammed shut, and I realized they had no intention of letting me back in. I stood on the side of the road, suitcase in hand, while their laughter drifted out the window as they drove away. For a few minutes, I convinced myself they would return, that maybe it was a misunderstanding, a cruel joke gone too far. I waited, my heart pounding, eyes glued to the curve in the road. But the minutes stretched into an hour, and the truth became undeniable. They had left me there on purpose. The realization was like ice settling into my veins. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a plan. Somewhere, in the quiet corners of their conversations, they had decided I was too heavy a weight to carry. They had chosen convenience over love and cruelty over compassion. I stood there numb, my grip on the suitcase handle cutting into my skin as the world around me blurred. I wasn't just abandoned, I was discarded. A lifetime of sacrifice, love, and devotion erased in a single calculated act. The silence of that empty road pressed in on me, louder than any words they could have spoken. I felt hollow, as though every part of me had been stripped away, alone, vulnerable, and broken. I wondered how a mother's heart could survive such betrayal. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I could keep going. What I didn't know then was that my story wasn't over. Help was closer than I realized, though it would come from the last place I expected. When I look back on that night, what stands out most isn't the cold or the fear, it's the moment kindness found me when I least expected it. I had been wandering aimlessly, dragging my suitcase across uneven ground, too numb to know where I was going. My mind replayed the betrayal again and again, and every step felt heavier than the last. I remember thinking, this might be the loneliest moment of my life. That's when I saw the glow of a small diner just off the road. The neon sign buzzed faintly. Half of the letters burned out, but to me, it looked like a beacon. I pushed the door open, and the warmth hit me before the smell of coffee even reached my nose. For a moment, I froze. Everyone inside turned to look at me, the disheveled woman with a suitcase, and tears streaking her face. I almost turned back, but then a woman behind the counter smiled. It wasn't pity, just genuine kindness, and she motioned me over. She poured a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter without asking questions. That small gesture, so ordinary, nearly broke me all over again. After hours of being discarded, I suddenly felt seen. She asked if I was passing through, and though my voice shook, I admitted I'd been left behind. She didn't press for details. Instead, she simply said, "You're safe here." She offered me a warm meal and later a small room above the diner that she sometimes rented out. It wasn't fancy, but to me, it felt like a sanctuary. Sitting there with hot soup in front of me and a roof over my head, the sharp edges of the day began to soften. For the first time since being abandoned, I felt a flicker of hope. A stranger had shown me more compassion in one evening than my own family had in months, maybe years. That night, I realized kindness has the power to heal wounds that betrayal leaves behind. And though my heart was still raw, I knew I couldn't give up. I wasn't finished yet, with the comfort of a stranger's generosity giving me strength. I began to wonder, what if I could rebuild, not just survive? The days that followed were quiet, and for the first time in a long time, the silence felt like mine. With a small room above the diner and the steady kindness of the woman who had taken me in, I began to breathe again. At first, it was just about survival, finding small tasks to occupy my mind, helping out in the diner when I could, folding napkins, bussing tables, anything to feel useful. But slowly, I began to realize I was more capable than I'd allowed myself to believe. I remembered skills I had almost forgotten: organizing, budgeting, cataloging, even the way I could connect with people simply by listening. I started keeping records for the diner, balancing the books, and streamlining the way supplies were ordered. What began as a small favor grew into something that made me feel like I had a purpose again. Customers noticed too. Some even lingered at the counter just to share their stories, and I realized I still had value beyond what my family had tried to strip away. It was during one of those evenings, helping the diner owner sort through some old boxes in storage, that I stumbled upon something unexpected. Tucked away in the corner was a dusty trunk that had belonged to her late father. She had never gone through it, saying it was too painful. With her permission, I began to carefully sort its contents. Inside were old documents, photographs, and to my astonishment, several items that looked far more valuable than simple keepsakes: antique silverware, hand-painted china, and even a small oil painting with a signature I recognized from my years of volunteering at the local museum back home. I couldn't believe my eyes. I realized this wasn't just clutter, it was a collection with potential worth. Pieces of history waiting to be recognized. In that moment, something shifted inside me. For so long, I had been made to feel irrelevant, as though my knowledge and instincts meant nothing. But here was proof that my skills, my eye for detail, my love of history still mattered. The diner owner looked at me with gratitude and trust, asking me to guide her through what to keep, what to sell, and how to honor her father's legacy. That discovery lit a fire in me. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was rebuilding. For the first time in years, I felt excited about tomorrow. And though I didn't know it yet, this new path would soon collide with the very people who had cast me aside. I had just started to believe my past was finally behind me when the knock came at the diner door. I'll never forget the way my heart dropped when I looked up and saw them standing there, my daughter and her husband. The very people who had left me on that roadside like discarded luggage. They carried the same polished smiles, the same tone of false sweetness that once fooled me so easily. They said they missed me, that they had been worried, that they wanted to make things right. Once upon a time, those words would have pierced straight into my heart. But now, after everything, I heard them differently. Every phrase was too practiced, every expression too rehearsed. I could see the calculation in their eyes. It didn't take long before the truth slipped through the cracks. They had seen the changes in my life, how I was rebuilding, how the diner was slowly thriving, and how my work with antiques had started attracting attention. They asked questions that weren't really questions at all, carefully circling around the subject of money, of opportunity, of whether I could use their help. I knew exactly what they were doing. They hadn't come for reconciliation. They had come for another chance to exploit me. And for the first time, I wasn't powerless. I smiled, nodded, and pretended to take the bait. Inside, though, I was already planning. Over the next few days, I let them believe they were drawing me back in. I listened patiently as they painted pictures of a shared future, of working together, of family businesses and combined resources. They thought they were clever, but every word only confirmed their greed. I played along, feeding them just enough to keep them hooked. Then came the moment of truth. I suggested we begin by liquidating some of the antiques I had been sorting. I told them I wasn't sure how the process worked and that I could really use their expertise in setting up accounts and transfers. Their eyes lit up with the same hunger I remembered from before. They agreed eagerly, practically tripping over themselves to be the ones in control. What they didn't know was that every step of the process had already been arranged with safeguards, with witnesses, with documentation that would expose them the moment they tried anything. And, as I expected, they did. The instant they thought real money was within their grasp, they made their move, redirecting transfers, manipulating details, all in the hopes of cutting me out once again. But instead of lining their pockets, All they did was leave a trail of evidence that revealed their intent. I sat across from them when the truth landed, calm and composed, while they scrambled to explain themselves. The trap had sprung, and they knew it. Their faces betrayed everything: the shock, the panic, the realization that they had underestimated me. For once, the power was mine. I didn't need to raise my voice or throw accusations. My silence, my steady gaze, and the knowledge that they had been caught in their own scheme was enough. That day, I felt something I hadn't in years vindicated. They had tried to destroy me, but I had turned their own greed against them. And in doing so, I proved to them and to myself that I was no longer the woman they could so easily discard. When I look back now, it's almost hard to recognize the woman I was on that lonely roadside. Broken, discarded, convinced that my story had ended. But if there's one thing life has taught me, it's that sometimes the worst moments can plant the seeds for something new. Being abandoned by my own family felt like the ultimate betrayal, and for a while I believed it had destroyed me. Yet, in reality, it set me free. Free from expectations that drained me. Free from relationships built only on what I could give. Free from a lifetime of being made to feel small. Through kindness from a stranger, I found shelter. Through rediscovering my own skills, I found purpose. And through facing my betrayers head-on, I found strength I didn't even know I had. What they meant for my downfall became the very thing that lifted me higher than I had ever stood before. The lesson is clear to me now. Love doesn't come from blood alone. Sometimes the people we call family can hurt us the deepest, and sometimes the people we least expect can help us heal. Family is not defined by DNA, but by who shows up, who stands by you, and who treats your heart with care. I used to think my worth was tied to what I gave others: money, time, sacrifice. Now I understand my worth is inherent, and it cannot be taken from me. That realization has been the greatest gift of all. If you are listening to this and you've ever felt abandoned, used, or unseen, please know you are not alone. Your story doesn't end with betrayal. It can begin there. You are stronger than you think, and sometimes the door that slams in your face is the very one that pushes you toward freedom. My journey wasn't easy, and my scars remain. But I carry them with pride now, because they remind me of everything I survived. And if I can rebuild my life from nothing, so can you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched something in your heart, I invite you to share your own experiences in the comments. Your voice matters. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and most importantly, never forget your worth.